All right, hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this final regular season edition of Football Talk. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith, Jr. This is an Inside Sports production. I will not be here alone. Of course, I'm joined by one of the foremost football minds in the business today, none other than Chris Lardieri of FootballNation.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris L. Sports. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Here is the man, Mr. Lardieri. What's happening?
Charles, thank you. 17 weeks in, and each week the introductions get better and better. Thank you. You had a stellar performance this season.
All right. Well, you must be talking about the picks segment, but we'll go ahead and get on to that later on. But first
yeah,
of
I should
all,
just throw in the towel now like the Giants, right?
Hey, the Giants are still on life support. They got a chance. So we're going to talk about that in just a bit here. But, you know, FN Follies, your column here. Fantastic as usual, but understand you may be taking a little bit of a Christmas break. Is that right?
Yeah, this week I had sat down to write something, but, you know, with the holidays and all, and, you know, the fact that other than the Jets-Chargers game and poor Greg McElroy getting sacked 11 times, there wasn't a heck of a lot humorous to write about. But, you know, with people being on the road and busy and spending time with family and friends, took a little 1 week sabbatical, but I will be back and better than ever next week. You can always read my observations via my Twitter feed at Chris L. Sports and also my blog, chrislsports.blogspot.com.
All right, fantastic. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First off, you know, the Seattle Seahawks, fresh off that thrashing 42-3, they just beat down the 49ers in Seattle. But also just found out that Richard Sherman is not going to be suspended. Apparently was going to be suspended for Adderall. He appealed that and got the decision today. So they're going to have him down the stretch and in the playoffs. That should be fantastic for the Seahawks. It just keeps getting better for them.
Yeah, it's got to be great news. You know, kind of a bigger picture story. Roger Goodell's not having too much luck here down the home stretch of the 2012 season with appeals and so forth. First, the Saints Bountygate suspensions overturned, and now Sherman. I mean, you know, that's less a function of Goodell's doing than anything. But just from a PR perspective, starting to see the players get a little bit of an upper hand. And, you know, people on the other side of the country might not realize this, but Sherman's a key cog in that wheel on what a lot of people saw on national TV last Sunday night is a tremendous defense.
Yeah, it's true. It's gonna be interesting to see how the Seahawks do in the playoffs. And when I look at that, that's what's really interesting about this year is you look at the stronger teams and what's proved to be the stronger teams like the Seahawks coming on, but untested young quarterback. The same thing with the 49ers. Then you got Matt Schaub over there in Houston. He and Gary Kubiak as collectively have never won a playoff game. The same thing with Matt Ryan over in Atlanta. But looks like there's all kinds of things. Just this should be a great playoff season that we're coming up on here.
Yeah, I think it's wide open, and, you know, probably somewhere through halfway through the season, everyone thought it was pretty much a sealed deal that it would be Atlanta versus Houston, that they'd roll through their respective conferences and get home field. But now you've got a few other teams that are peaking at the right time, kind of like we saw with the Giants last season. You've got the Packers over in the NFC who've been completely on fire since the infamous game in Seattle with the replacement refs that essentially ended the lockout. You've got the Vikings, who, if they can get into the playoffs, have really gotten a roll, carried on the backs of Adrian Peterson. The Seahawks, like you mentioned, over in the AFC, you can never count out the Patriots, and the Broncos just look like they are completely clicking. Peyton Manning, all the questions about his arm strength are long forgotten. What do you think about that?
Yeah, most definitely. You know, let's talk about the Broncos. You know, could they possibly be Super Bowl bound? I mean, they've won 10 in a row. They've got Kansas City this week, so it looks like it's going to be 11 in a row and a bye going into the playoffs. So who knows what they'll do? But you couldn't script it any better for them as far as you know, getting the wins they needed. The long streak, then getting a little bit of rest. So they got a few veterans like Champ Bailey who like to lick their wounds for a week or so before they get into the playoffs too.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm sure Peyton would like a week off as well to recharge your brain and watch some game film. So, you know, there's been kind of a back and forth in recent years. You look like the Packers and the Giants, who didn't have the bye and went on to win the Super Bowl. Whether that leaves a rust on the team, I don't know. But when you've got a team like Denver with some older stars, I think that can help. And then having a home game in Denver where it could be potentially cold and brutal, and that defense just really hammering the opponent's offense. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, and then let's go to the other side of the coin in the AFC, which is 2 weeks in a row there. The same pick that he threw to lose the game against the Dallas Cowboys, he throws that same pick against the Bengals, and it costs him the game. So something went wrong there in Pittsburgh, not just with Roethlisberger, but the Roethlisberger injury, but things just didn't really seem to be in sync for the Steelers kind of all year long this year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the season got off to a rough start, getting spanked by the Broncos on Sunday Night Football. But on the defensive side of the ball, they had a ton of injuries. Polamalu was never really at full strength. It almost seemed like, he was kind of getting his feet under him as the year progressed when he returned. And then with Roethlisberger going out after that Monday night game against the Chiefs, essentially killed their season because, Charlie Batch won that big game on the road at Baltimore, but they basically need a Roethlisberger back, and I can't fault them. I'd take a Roethlisberger at 60 or 70% over a Charlie Batch or a Byron Leftwich. But as you mentioned in pre-production, he just didn't have the zip on the ball, and I'm sure it'll come out after the fact. It's got to be painful throwing with an injury like that. And I know he essentially threw the game away, but on the defensive side, how do you let A.J. Green, who we've talked about as being the next big wide receiver that no one seems to talk about, how do you let him get that wide open with less than a minute to go in a game and the Bengals driving for a game-winning field goal? So, you can blame Ben all you want, but the defense made make the stops when they needed to, and the running game never got off the ground. Mendenhall being hurt in the doghouse, then back. I mean, they never really seemed to have all four wheels running at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. And just kind of a weird year, that started in the last year's playoff loss, inexplicable loss to the Broncos. Then coming into this season, it was just topsy-turvy, a roller coaster ride all year long. But that just shows when you're a good franchise, people just expect you to, go out there and win year after year. But hey, this happens sometimes, and I believe they missed the playoffs after winning the Super Bowl a few years back. So it happens, but the Steelers, the same great organization they've always been. I'm sure they'll rebound in the years to come here.
You know what? Look on the bright side. You're not the Kansas City Chiefs. So, it's a disappointing year, but I would take it over, a good 14 to 16 other teams in the league, I'm sure.
Yep. Now, also, let's go back to the NFC and a team that you talked about. You mentioned the Packers. They started out 1-2. And, the Monday night loss to Seattle, but the Packers, very quietly, they've gone 10-2 since then. 11-4 record here coming into the final weekend. And, maybe they poised and ready. Have we been overlooking them? Are they just going, under the radar here?
I think they are. And I was high on them even in our preseason discussions on the NFC, and I think what's happened there is a couple key guys got hurt at the right time, if there is such a thing. Greg Jennings is now back. Looks like he's healthy. On the defensive side, Clay Matthews and Charles Woodson. So it's odd. It's key guys get hurt in the middle of the year. They come back at the end. It's almost like a little bit of a rest period for them, and they come back ready to go. And I think that's what's happened there. On top of that, they've somewhat discovered their running game with old friend Ryan Grant, and now James Starks kind of waking up here down the stretch. So I think that's a team to watch out for. Last year they had that 15-0, that undefeated season hanging over their head when they went into Kansas. 14-0 when they went into Kansas City, and then the last game of the year against the Lions is basically a bunch of backups playing, so that was kind of an odd year. They were really rusty when they faced the Giants, but right now I think that's a team to watch out for in the NFC. They would scare me if I were going up against them. Yep,
and you talk about the Giants, and the Giants are on the brink here. 2 straight losses, and the champs are reeling. They're against the ropes. They're taking blows, and the referee is watching the fight very closely to see if he should jump in and wave it off. What about the Giants? They still have a chance. They got to win this week. They need both the Vikings. They need the Vikings, the Bears, and the Cowboys to lose, and they'll be in the playoffs. Talk to me about your Giants, man.
Yeah. I mean, well, as we mentioned before the show started, you never hit a 3-team parlay in Vegas, and that's what the Giants are up against Sunday. And on top of that, their old buddy Michael Vick will be playing, getting one last hurrah. Andy Reid's last hurrah with the Eagles. Look, I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles just snuck up on them and gave them one going-away present for the fans in Philly. But regardless, this is a team who, I don't want to say they quit, but they just didn't seem to have that hunger. And it was like, you look at the Atlanta game and the Baltimore game, they get down early and just no fight in the team. There just never seemed to be any sort of urgency. What we saw was the pass rush that carried them down the stretch last year wasn't there, and it exploited the weakness in their linebackers and especially in their secondary. And Corey Webster, this decade's version of Elvis Toast Patterson, out there on the corner. I know he picked off Favre a few times in that 07 NFC Championship game, but his time has passed him. And if you don't get that pass rush, you better get some corners. And I know they had a lot of injuries, but a lot of other teams did. But even still, the offense never really seemed to get clicking or off the ground. There were some discussions coming out of New York. Did Eli have an injury or arm troubles? I really don't know, but nothing was clicking. So in an odd way, if they miss the playoffs, might be a good thing. I think Coughlin and crew will probably start cracking down. There'll be some personnel changes, but to not make the playoffs after being in the driver's seat in the NFC East is inexcusable, quite frankly. So at the very least, they should be playing next week, and I highly doubt they're going to be.
All right, well, we'll have to see because, stranger things have happened, as they say. But, one of the teams you mentioned that has to lose, and that is the Chicago Bears, are going to be in Detroit. Detroit at 4-11, they're not going anywhere, obviously, but might we have another CJ2K, and that is Calvin Johnson looking to be the first receiver to get 1,000 yards. And, could he do it against that Bears defense? All he needs is 108 yards receiving, and that'll make him the first 2,000-yard receiver in the history of the NFL. He already passed Jerry Rice last week.
Yeah, I could easily see that happening. I mean, it's amazing. The Lions have had no weapons all year. Teams have been double-teaming them, and this guy's unstoppable. And, so much for the Madden jinx. Johnson was on the cover of the game this year, and, while it didn't help his team, it clearly didn't affect his performance. So, more power to him. I'd love to see it. Remind me back in the kind of resurgent days of the Lions when Barry Sanders cracked 2,000 yards last game of the 97 season against the Jets. At least give Lions fans something to hope for. But in kind of a must-win game for the Bears, we'll see. Their defense really hasn't stepped it up the last few weeks, so should be interesting.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where, the Giants could have a better shot than we think because it's not inconceivable to see the Bears going into Detroit and kind of laying an egg against the Lions. That could happen there.
Yeah, as the late, great Pete Rozelle said, any given Sunday. So I agree with you. It's, I could see it happening. The problem is at number 3 and being in Vegas enough times to know that when you want 3 teams to win, it never or rarely happens. So I bet 2 of the 3 will happen. How about that? We'll get a 67% likelihood.
All right, and the other kid trying to set a record here. We all remember 1984. Then we put the cover up from Sports Illustrated. Rush to Glory. Eric Dickerson, 2,105 yards. That's still the record that stands today. But all day, Adrian Peterson, is he going to break it? He would need 208 yards against the Packers this week. Kind of seemed like a formidable task there, but what do you think about that? What are AP's chances?
First of all, kudos on that Sports Illustrated cover. I remember that as a kid. That was a good find from the archives. Look, if the Vikings are going to win, and they really are a playoff team, they're going to need Peterson to do it. So I would not put it past them. I know Green Bay's defense has been playing well, but by no means are they the 85 Bears. So I could see it happening, especially given the fact that Peterson's been ripping off a lot of long runs this year. he rolls off another 70, 80-yarder, and they keep pounding the ball at him the rest of the game. It's not out of the question. So it'll be interesting. If he doesn't get it, I think it'll be pretty close. I don't think we're going to see Peterson with 20 carries and 30 yards. This guy's going to do something. So on multiple levels, it should be a must-watch game Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. And then, the other, of course, must-watch game, we talk about the Cowboys and the Redskins possibly with everything on the line that night, depending on how the other games play out. But one thing, the Cowboys, they lost last week, but one guy, and that was Dez Bryant. I just wonder, does someone need to just take him aside, grab him by the collar, and just shake him senseless until he realizes just what type of a threat he could be? He's incredible. Dez Bryant, I would say this, he is an incredible talent. We're looking at like Randy Moss type. This guy could be just a difference maker, almost like we've never seen in the league before.
Yeah, definitely, and you hit the nail on the head. Randy Moss is a great comparison. Guy could have been one of the greatest wide receivers ever and never really materialized. Had some tremendous seasons, almost revitalized his career in New England, and that fell by the wayside too. So, yeah, he needs, I don't know if it's Dion or Michael Irvin, some sort of mentor to basically smack some sense and proverbial sense into him, because this guy's easily, like you said, one of the talent-wise, probably one of the top 3 or 4 receivers in the NFL. But he's got to keep that head screwed on straight, and he's got to have a better attitude. And until then, I'm skeptical. He'll go out there one week and win a game for you and go out another and completely blow it or quit on you. You don't know. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, it's the other thing. When I look at guys like Dez Bryant, it's one thing when they talk about the money, the fame and all that. There's a lot of rich guys in the league, at least when they're playing and before they retire and become broke, but that's another story. But the chance to actually have that to be where conversations begin and end with you, the chance to really set yourself apart, where you're not just another guy who played in the NFL, or even a guy who played in the NFL and was an all-pro. But when they start talking about the best wide receivers ever in 20, 30 years from now, to have a chance to have yourself actually be included in that conversation is something very rare. And that's what guys like Dez Bryant have to realize, is the chance to really do something significant here and just immortalize yourself. And they don't seem to realize that. A lot of guys don't seem to realize that until maybe it's too late.
I know, and I don't know if he needs to watch like some of these Football Life episodes that NFL Network's been airing every week that are great, just to kind of see how some of the greats handle adversity or just their life story in general. Does he want to be, like you said, a great receiver, a guy when his name comes up for consideration for the Hall of Fame, it's a no doubt, slam dunk, no-brainer, you're in when there's no debate. So, yeah, hard to say. I mean, easy for me and you to say, being proverbial working stiffs, like, oh, this guy doesn't realize what he has. But, with the way athletes are today, it just doesn't sink into their head sometimes, I guess.
Well, it's something that Steve Young was talking about, too, when he was on the air, and he said that, the more talented players just tend to not work as hard, the more gifted athletes, because things have always kind of come easy to them. And that may be the case with Dez Bryant, who goes out there and he clearly had the New Orleans defense outclassed. He just had them outclassed. Could pretty much get open whenever he wanted. Got 2 58-yard touchdown passes from Romo last week, even though they lost. But, he's a force, and he has to realize just what the threat of him being out there does to the entirety of the defense that he's facing.
Definitely. And Steve Young makes a great point. You look at someone like Jerry Rice, who came out of Mississippi Valley State, very talented, but even still, the guy was probably one of the hardest working players in the NFL, and that's what made him great. And then you look at someone like, for instance, Adrian Peterson. Guy had a lot of talent, ripped his knee up, really to the point where they didn't think he was even going to play this year, and worked his butt off to the point now where he's likely going to be the MVP of the NFL. You need to look at guys like that. You can have all the talent in the world that'll get you there, but when it gets to the game where you get paid to play, there's a difference separating the men from the boys.
That's right. It's all about that work ethic. So, let's go ahead and get into our favorite segment here. How about the picks of the week? What do you think, Mr. Lardieri?
I know it's your favorite segment. In the last few weeks it hasn't been mine, but let's do it.
All right, so there you got the standings after Week 16. I'm at 64-39. My colleague is at 60-43 at this point. I went 3-4 last week. That gave you a big chance to catch up, and unfortunately, you went with your hated Cowboys against the New Orleans Saints. There, that was the difference.
Yeah,
there.
and considering if the Cowboys had won that game, the Giants would have been eliminated. I was really trying to be objective and use my head, but that's a case where I really should have gone with my heart and my deep-rooted, I won't say hate, but dislike of the Cowboys.
Yes, a slight.
But I didn't.
A slight distaste.
Right.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into the games this week. I'll start off with this first one here. The Bears at 9-6, going into Detroit, playing the Lions. Lions at 4-11. Calvin Johnson on the cusp of becoming the first ever 2,000-yard receiver in the history of the league. And here's how I see this game. Even though with the importance that it has for the Bears, one of those many NFC teams sitting there at 9-6 on that playoff bubble. But I like the Lions to finally come together, to suck it up for one last game for the fans, to win one for the Gipper or whomever. And, I think that the Bears on the road, they've not been playing that well. In Detroit, this is going to be my upset pick of the week. I've got the Lions beating the Bears in this game. Massive, huge upset. What do you think about this one?
I'd love to do that. I'm somewhat sentimental about the Lions. Always been a big Barry Sanders fan. The city of Detroit deserves a winner in its NFL franchise. Really happy for Calvin Johnson. But at the end of the day, none of those guys play defense for the Lions, and you or I probably could play for them right now. And I think with their backs up against the wall and fighting for their playoff lives, I know they haven't been playing that great lately, but I think the Bears go in there and win and essentially stick a nail in the Giants' coffin to boot.
Well, the Lions have to play well at some point. They still have all the defensive guys are there, even though they haven't been playing that well. And Matt Forte, maybe pulling up a little bit lame here at the end of the season. I think it might be the perfect storm in there in Detroit, but we'll see.
Either way, one of us will win this pick this week. That much I know.
Okay, then we got the 4-11 Eagles out of the playoff picture, but they've got Nick Foles gets his hand injured. Michael Vick is going to be back in playing at New York against the Giants. Giants on playoff life support. Giants at 8-7. How do you see this one?
Not that I'd love to pick the Eagles, but something tells me that, I think back a few years ago to the infamous Deshaun Jackson game where they punted the ball to him. I think of last year when Vic was out and Vince Young came in and beat him in their house on a Sunday night. I think it'll be a close game. I think the Eagles will put up a fight. They're not going to quit, as I mentioned earlier, with the likely last game for Reed and Vic and Philly. But I think the Giants will probably win a sloppy game, closer than it should be. Don't ask me why they put it all together this week, but maybe their proverbial playoff game. So I'll pick them, even though something in my head tells me not to be surprised when the Eagles win.
All right, well we're gonna agree on that game there. I got the Giants winning that game. I don't think the Eagles, their season is done. Reed's coaching career in Philadelphia is done. The team is done. Michael Vick is going to be out of there. There's no way. I don't see any way they can go in there and win this game in New York. I just can't see it happening. So I'm going to go with you on that. I think the Giants are going to take this game.
All right. Well, we agree on one finally. So now you'll still have a lead.
Well, let's go to the next game though. The Texans at 12-3. Going into Indianapolis to play the Colts. The Colts at 10-5. Of course, Andrew Luck having a great season. The Texans, though, they lost last week. Arian Foster, irregular heartbeat from what I understand, though it turned out it's not anything serious, so he will be playing this week, and best of all, his health is not in jeopardy. But I think that Houston is going to get right in this game. The Colts, a good record, and Luck has had a good season, but I don't think he's up to the pressure yet of it, especially with a defense like Houston has. So I like Houston to go in and take care of business against the Colts. Colts, obviously, they're going to see some postseason action, but this weekend, I think this belongs to the Texans. I'm going to take the Texans to beat the Colts here.
Normally I would agree with you. I think Ben Tate's a very good backup running back. He can start for most teams in this league, but I think with the Colts being at home, losing down there in Houston a few weeks ago, the good news that Chuck Pagano has been released from his treatment and will be returning to some duty with the Colts. I'm going to pick them. I think this will sort of be a playoff game for them, and I think Luck knows what he did against this very tough, vaunted Texans defense. But, I thought the Texans would stomp over the Vikings last week, and while the defense showed up, I was not impressed at all with the offense, and I think they're sputtering here down the stretch. So Colts in an upset.
Well, depends. If the Colts have if they have the stuff to put the kibosh on Arian Foster, they definitely have a shot, because I think what got exposed about the Texans is that if you make it so that Matt Schaub has to beat you, they're going to struggle. So we'll see. We'll see. This should be a good game, though.
Definitely.
Okay, and then we got the Ravens. Ravens at 10-5, going into Cincinnati to play the Bengals. The Bengals at 9-6, clinched last week with that big victory over the Steelers. The Ravens sputtering a little bit, a lot of injuries, and I think they're going to get, from what I understand, Ray Lewis will be back for the playoffs. I like the Ravens, starting to play good ball at the right time, and the Bengals, they played well, but you got to think they're going to have, a little bit of a letdown at some point here. So not just the law of averages, but I think that the Ravens have got to establish themselves as one of the stronger teams going into the playoffs. So I think this starts by going into Cincinnati and taking care of business against the Bengals. So I like the Ravens in this game.
Yeah, the Ravens really impressed me last week. That looks like the playoff caliber team, the team we saw rolling through opponents in the earlier part of the season, beating the Patriots at home. Jim Caldwell and Flacco were clearly on the same page last week, albeit against a not very formidable Giants secondary. But, I mean, they basically toyed with the Giants, and I think they might be clicking at the right time. Whether Ray Lewis plays or not, I think that's just more motivation than anything. Essentially, the Bengals got the playoffs locked up. I would love to pick them here, but I just think, the Ravens probably have a little more to play for, at least to get the ball rolling heading into the postseason. And I think that Andy Dalton can be shut down, so I'll agree with you here. Baltimore wins.
Okay, and then let's go on. NFC tilt here. The Packers, 11-4, going up against the Vikings. Packers have gone, 10-2 in their last 12 games. The Vikings really need this game to get into the playoffs. Adrian Peterson, we've mentioned, going for Eric Dickerson's record of 2,105 yards. The Packers, the Vikings, all the marbles for the Vikings. What do you think about this one?
You know what? Even though the Packers are on a roll, and I think they're playing great, and they're probably one of the, if not the favorite in the NFC right now, I think the Vikings are on this tremendous push, being carried by Adrian Peterson. I think they smell a playoff berth. They want it, and I think they win at home. They're a very tough team at home in the Dome still. And, for a little while they played the Packers tough in Lambeau earlier this season. I think they put it together for all four quarters.
Okay, well, we talked about the Packers earlier, and, looking at Ryan Grant coming back, James Starks. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is really rounding into form and has been playing great and under the radar. This is a statement game for them. Also a division rival, of course. So I like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers playing good ball. I wouldn't be surprised to see Adrian Peterson run wild, but I don't think that, and this is the thing I picked against the Vikings last week, not trusting Christian Ponder. Still, I think that's going to be the issue. I don't think Ponder against the Packers defense is going to be able to get that done. So I think one of those rare occasions you're going to have the elation, the highs and the lows, as Adrian Peterson gets to that hallowed mark, passes Eric Dickerson, but it's going to be in a losing effort against the Packers, and what's going to be a big, exciting game, though.
Yeah, I mean, even if your prediction does come true, which naturally I hope it doesn't, to see him break the record will definitely be worth it.
All right, and then we got the Rams. Rams 7-7-1. The Seahawks, they're going into Seattle, where the Seahawks are proving as close to unbeatable as you can get really there. So the Seahawks at 10-5. The Rams going in. Any chance for the Rams there in Seattle?
No, and I think the Seahawks run the table. They keep that perfect record at home, and with the good news that Sherman will not be suspended, I think they win another one.
And you know what? All I can say about the Rams is, looking at the record, the 7-7-1, I think they did a lot better this year, even though they were ups and down, topsy-turvy, more so. But still, I think they played a lot better than people thought they would. So this bodes well for them in the future and going into next season and beyond. I'm sure Bradford got a little bit of confidence from this season, but no way do the Rams go in and beat the Seahawks in Seattle. I got the Rams in this game also.
You mean the Seahawks?
I mean Seahawks. I'm sorry, Seahawks. Yes.
Oh,
I've got the Seahawks.
Rewind the tape there, and I hope I gain a gain. I'm on you right there. Now watch the Rams win and spoil it for both of us.
All right, so Cowboys and Redskins. The Cowboys at 8-7, Redskins at 9-6. This game is in D.C. though. This is going to be the big game on Sunday night. Ends the season. Very possibly a win if you're in game. The Eastern Conference, or excuse me, the NFC East title could be on the line there. RG3 up against Tony Romo. RG3 in front of the home crowd. I'm looking at RG3. I'm looking at the Redskins being on an incredible roll, 6 straight games. I don't see the Cowboys winning this game. So I'm going with the hot team. I'm going with the Redskins to win this game, make the playoffs, and RG3 is going to see some postseason action here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think the stars are aligned for the Redskins to win a division this year. Even if RG3 isn't healthy, Shanahan has the luxury of, if he has to pull him or if he gets hurt again, Kirk Cousins, who's really developed into a nice backup quarterback and knows the offense. And at the end of the day, I'll say it over and over again, I don't trust Tony Romo in a big game. I don't trust this Dallas defense. So ultimately, that's why I point to the Redskins.
Yep. So we shall see. Be a fantastic final week in the NFL. So, hey, everybody, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. Every week it's Football Talk live on Ustream.tv, and then everything is archived on YouTube. Remember, read Chris' column there on FootballNation.com, his FN Follies column, and also follow him on Twitter at Chris L. Sports. You can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, just a couple things that I've noticed during the week that have piqued my interest. Funny how it took Greg McElroy getting sacked 11 times and getting a concussion for Sanchez to get his job back. And at least we know Tim Tebow won't be playing in the Meadowlands next year. And as crazy as it sounds, we're entering a great time of year with the playoffs and all, but it's going to be interesting. On New Year's Eve, I'm sure it'll be a lot of coaches hitting the unemployment line. Don't be surprised if Andy Reid and Norv Turner are the first 2 names you hear. But just going to get this flurry of coaching candidates and rumors, and all the experts on ESPN and Fox and NFL Network will have their theories. But it's going to be a wide open year with a lot of coaching vacancies in some pretty high profile places. So it's going to be an interesting week leading up to the first round of the playoffs.
Yep, most definitely. And then, like to talk about playoffs. That's my favorite time of year. We're going to get to talk playoffs and pick the first rounds next week. And a lot of variables because you have so many young teams, inexperienced teams who played some great ball. But at the most important position on the team, that's quarterback, a lot of untested players there. So you enjoy this final weekend and then get strapped in for the playoffs because it should be quite a ride.
Definitely. We'll see who the men are and who the boys are.
Okay, so there you go, folks. So for Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. Hey, you all had a Merry Christmas. Go ahead and have a Happy New Year. If you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. You know all of those cliche things. But remember, with all the talk about guns, killing people. Remember, drunk drivers kill more people than handguns every year, so do not become one of those statistics. Do not drink and drive on New Year's. Everybody have a safe and sane New Year, and we'll see everybody next year right here on Inside Sports. This is Football Talk. Thank you for joining us.